they want to start off with.
Question.
I'm curious about your format for Stranded. It seems like they're not staying in locations that long.
For Stranded, they're not?
Yeah, it seems like that. But what is the format that you give them when they're there?
Oh, you mean from room to room kind of thing?
Well, from night to night.
I see.
need you to go to this location, at least stay there for how long?
I see. So the question was on Stranded, how long are they staying in each part of the property that they're in? We don't really put any constraints on them. You know, so this is an interesting question about Stranded. It's the idea for Stranded is that we take people that are enthusiasts about the paranormal, either believers or skeptics or kind of agnostics. We invite them to live in a purportedly haunted location for 5 days. And so they stay there for 4 nights and 5 days, and they largely self-document that experience. And then we have some cameras in the house that view them as well. There's no camera crew or producers in there with them. What's interesting is that when we set out to make the show, I think what was really important for me was to not replicate an existing format on the channel. So I didn't want to make another Ghost Hunters. I didn't want to make, there are a lot of shows on Sci-Fi that have professional paranormal investigators. Between Ghost Hunters and the Zaffis Family and DT and Fact or Faked and Haunted Highway. I mean, you've got all these shows where people are doing professional paranormal investigations. And I think that we wanted to do something that was less structured than that, where you had real people who maybe aren't always great investigators, but they have strong beliefs that often conflict with each other, and we put them in a situation and we just sort of voyeuristically say, you do what you want to do, you conduct the kind of experiential investigation you want to conduct, and we're going to sit back and watch and see what happens. So it's interesting. Sometimes, as a producer, it can be frustrating. When I watch the raw footage, even beyond just staying in a room for a certain amount of time, sometimes I think, oh, I wish that you had done this one thing, or this thing you're talking about, you're not really filming, so I can't see it. And you want to get in there and kind of put your fingers in the clay and shape the story. But what makes Stranded unique is that we don't. We let them tell the story through their footage, and so sometimes you get really interesting, surprising results. Like we've had really cool pieces of evidence come out of the show. Sometimes they don't always do what you want them to do. Sometimes they cry and scream, and it's interesting. Like the episode that aired the other night, the girl really comes unglued in this episode. She just melts down. And half the people who talked to me about it were very sympathetic toward her, and the other half found her really, annoying and difficult to watch because she just couldn't take it. But that's, for me, the interesting thing about the show is that you're getting a kind of real look at what happens when you ask people to live in a haunted house and to see how different people react to it. They don't always react the way that maybe we want them to.
When you have those people stranded, do you monitor them real time, or do you collect all the video after the fact?
It's a bit of both. I can see them in some rooms some of the time. So some of the cameras have a live feed that exits the property to a production truck that's not on the property, but that's kind of down in town somewhere. But I can't see them a lot of the time. They have to be, like, I can always see them in their bedroom. I can always see them in the kitchen. I can usually see them in a main living room that I know they're going to be in. But we have so many houses and so many cameras in the house that they don't all feed live. They could, it would just be really expensive to do that. So our ability to watch them is limited. We make sure we watch them kind of off-site while they're sleeping, so that if something goes wrong in the sort of primary rooms that they're in, we can see them. But no, what's really interesting is that my idea of what the show is going to look like is so limited from what I can see, and then when I see the raw tapes, I'm amazed by all the things that happen that occur in parts of the house that I've never been able to see before. So, and that way it's also kind of a risky show, because you're really giving a lot of authority to the 3 participants to not only be on the show, but to make the show, to film it.
Josh.
Sir.
Josh, I was wondering, I asked Rex yesterday, but the Chernobyl, when you went to try it, Ukraine, the actual resistance, how did you accomplish it? Be able to get the clearance, get there, to put your life at risk. It was so amazing to me.
To the Chernobyl episode?
Yeah.
You want to talk about Chernobyl for a second?
Talk about the logistics of it.
The logistics of it, it really started as a joke almost. We had, by that point in the show, sort of established this idea that we would go to difficult places on the show. We would go to kind of, out of the way destinations that people hadn't filmed in very often. And I think as a throwaway comment, somebody said, hey, well, what if we went to Chernobyl? That'd be crazy. And then we sort of thought, well, could you do that? Could you go to Chernobyl and spend an extended amount of time there? And we looked into it, and you can. The permission situation was fortuitous. I mean, we got permission from the government in Ukraine. We had a government, what's called a government minder, or essentially just a government liaison or official who checked in with us and was with us through the checkpoints and made sure that we were doing what we were supposed to be doing. But they were actually very cooperative. There are some funny rules when you get closer to the heart of it. That there's certain angles they don't want you to film the reactor from, which is a little weird, probably because they don't want you to see the condition that it's really in. And the one thing about it that was sort of concerning is, like, my big question was, because we had Geiger counters and dosimeters, and dosimeters measure like accumulated radiation. It's like a turkey oven timer that you wear, and when it bings, you're cooked and you're done. And so my big question was, what is the number on the Geiger counter that comes up that I'm going the other way? Like what? Because I don't, it's all like millisieverts. It's I don't know anything about it. So my question to all these guys who work there is like, what is the scary number? What is the like we're out of here number? And they're all so like, it's okay, there's nothing, they're like super relaxed about it. And I'm like, no, what's the number? What is the number? And it was, we're all in the like Andromeda strain suits, and we spent the whole night there. And it's a really, look, I think in the history of the show, it's one of the more memorable places that, for me, that we've been. For those of you who haven't seen it, that there's an entire city, essentially, at the Chernobyl reactor site, which was built for the workers and was abandoned when the reactor melted down. And it's sitting there, frozen in time. And there are apartment buildings, and a civic center, and a gymnasium, and a hotel, and a Ferris wheel, and a school. And it's all sort of sitting there. And the residents were told when they evacuated that they would be able to come back shortly in a few days, and so nobody really took anything. So there's clothes in the closets and food on the table and homework on the school desks, and it's as though everybody was there 5 minutes ago. And because of that, it's beyond just being one of those really atmospheric abandoned places. There's this sense that everybody just evaporated, and it's really a scary place because of that. I mean, and you sort of couple that with the radiation concerns, and for me, it was one of the more memorable nights that we had.
I totally agree. Josh is right on that whole kind of mysteriousness and kind of just creep factor. Just that the fact that everything was like they just picked up and left. That kind of gives you a foreboding feeling that something definitely went wrong here, and that there's potential for more danger. So having everything kind of in a disarray and kind of dilapidation and the natural shrubbery and trees are kind of retaking that town. It's kind of like, what was that show that was like After the World Ends or something like that? They had on like, have you guys heard of that one?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that, and it's kind of an eerie feeling. And then you kind of, your imagination starts to kind of play with you, and you're like, was there somebody just walking by that window? And did I just hear a door shut? And we really got some good evidence. Quite a few things happened. We got that good hit on the FLIR on the second story that I think was the gymnasium, as if somebody's walking on the outside walkway upstairs. There's no ledge there, so it'd be kind of impossible for something to walk up there. Jael got touched, which is pretty amazing. But what really was a challenge for us was, like Josh mentioned, the radiation factor. That's a real danger. And we took certain steps to try to protect ourselves. We took a thyroid protection medication to protect our thyroid glands from thyroid cancer. And Josh even made a reference to it as a joke. It's like, who cares what it tastes like? It tastes like
it was like grape flavor.
Yeah.
It's like, who cares? It's
and he look on it, says like, take an emergency situation of nuclear radiation exposure, something like that.
Yeah, grape flavor.
Grape flavor.
Unnecessary to flavor it.
Yeah, exactly. But we took different steps, and I mean, it was a real threat, and each crew member really did express concern and understanding that this was a real danger. And I know other people kind of talked about it, but I wanted to have more kids. I didn't want to, give birth to the next creature on the Sci-Fi Channel movie.
Right.
But yeah, it was a real danger. That was probably one of the most challenging investigations that I can recall ever doing in my life, and being on the show. Not only the radiation, but you know, there's lots of possibilities. These things are in ruins. There's potentials for collapse, and then the radiation themselves. You know, I didn't want to develop any cancer days later. That was a great question. Thanks.
I was just going to add that it just sort of remembered it. One of the things that really stuck out for me at that investigation is, so we all had these dosimeters, and in some ways that was more important to us than the Geiger counter, because it was your personal. You know, this was like, this is my number. I know how much radiation I'm getting here, and so we each had one. And I remember that our camera guy Evan, you know, they handed him out, and I looked over, and Evan is duct taping it to his crotch, and he wore it right here. He was like, "Dude, this is the zone. This is what I'm going after. This is what I want to protect." But it really is, you know, as Rex said. I mean, it's amazing how fast nature comes back. You know, we think of our cities and our accomplishments, the things that man creates, as being so permanent, and it's amazing to see. Even like if you do an investigation of a disused prison or a hospital, places that, or like Moundsville in West Virginia, was used as a prison up until, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, relatively recently. And as soon as water and the elements get into a building, it's so incredible how fast nature just begins to reclaim it. And in Chernobyl, there's deer running around and trees coming up through the center of the road, and there's animal life everywhere. Weird animal life, probably, but nature, you know, sort of just sloughs it off, and you know, the human presence there is just completely forgotten. So it's a very, very creepy place. Sir, you were asking something.
Yes, I had to let my ventriloquist.
Yeah, it was good. It was very convincing. Yeah.
And last night, you know, I'm sure there was no problem. You were in the bar last night. Simon, you guys were glowing green a little.
A little bit, yeah. It's a residual effect.
The question I have was, when you were at the Chinese Wall, was there any personal experience you've had that was greater than that for you? Because that seemed to really rattle you that particular time. So was there anything greater than that for you?
It did rattle me. You know, I'm sort of a paranormal agnostic even now after all these years. I really, one of the things that, you know, Jay and Grant from Ghost Hunters would always say is, you know, if you do this long enough, you're going to get punched, kicked, slapped. They had this sort of, you know, litany of things they would list that are going to happen if you do this long enough. And I used to hear them say that all the time and think, man, that's never happened to me. I've been to all these places that are notoriously haunted. I've never been physically touched by anything. It's just never happened to me. And that was the one place where we were up on the Great Wall of China, and we wear these goofy backpacks on the show that you see that have this big swing arm that sticks out that films us. And the backpacks have cameras on, you know, mounted on them, and occasionally the camera operators will come behind us and change tapes or fiddle with the settings. And so sometimes you just sort of stand there and get jostled around as they work on the backpack. And that's what was happening. I was standing there and being sort of roughly moved around by what I thought was my camera operator, Evan. And I turned to ask him something, and he's like, you know, 20 feet behind me, and there's nothing behind me at all. And it was just this moment where, I mean, my blood froze. It was just this moment where I suddenly realized that I still cannot account for what happened to me, but I felt physically, you know, jostled by something, very palpably. You know, it wasn't a subtle thing. And it's one of those things that has really stayed with me and really shook me up at the time, because I can't account for it. You know, it's one of those things that happens and makes you ask a lot of questions. Yeah. Sure.
This one's for Rex. Now I know we see a lot of the crew slip, trip, fall. Everybody but Josh.
That's right.
I disagree.
It's because I'm editing the show.
What was the worst injury that you had to treat while on sea?
That's a really great question.
Just how much you heard it.
So the question is, what's the worst injury or illness that I've had to treat on my time at Destination Truth? There's actually two that really come to mind. One being a rider's spill that she took on the motorcycle in Thailand. Whoever watched that episode may recall that she was on a bike, no helmet, went down in the dirt, smashed her arm on the ground. She actually ended up breaking her elbow. She had a hairline fracture to her elbow, and she suffered some pretty severe lacerations to her arm, which we ended up stitching right there and yeah, it was not fun.
She took it like she laid there and got
Just took
stitched
it,
up
yeah.
with, she took a shot of something, I think. She took a stick in her mouth. It was like full.
Yeah, I think it was Kyle's wallet or your wallet or
Yeah,
something
she had
like
a wallet
that.
in her mouth, I think.
Yeah, that term "bite the bullet." That's kind of what she was doing. And I mean, talk about a tough cookie. This girl can. I mean, she holds her own. People can give her a lot of grief. We'll read about it in blogs and things, and people, oh, writer's scared. She always freaks out. But this chick, this is a tough chick. I mean, she takes a lot of abuse when she's going out there with us and investigating. I physically had to stitch her right there on it was like a picnic table out in the middle of the jungle, this area, and no lidocaine, no numbing, straight hook needle right through the flesh and stitching her up. Yeah.
Hold on, I'm gonna call it.
Yeah. Shit. Yeah.